Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Chantel and today I'm going to be doing my bi-weekly wrap-up. So this is the thing that I do every 2 weeks where I talk about what I've been reading, what I've finished, what I'm currently in the middle of, what I may have up on deck, and maybe occasionally if I've watched a movie that I want to talk about, I may talk about that as well. So yeah, that's what we're doing today. I did finish 4 books in the last 2 weeks, which is pretty good for me. That's reading at a pretty quick clip. I am reading at a pretty quick clip right now. So I do have a fair amount of things to talk about. I will say I am still working on the Maria Theresa biography. Again, it's way too big for me to want to haul down here to show on the video every time, but you'll just have to trust me when I say that I am still reading it and still making progress on it. I would say I'm about halfway through it right now. Storygraph is showing me less than halfway through, but that's because there's like 150 pages of endnotes, bibliography, citations, index, etc., at the end of the book that obviously don't really count as reading the book, so I'm farther in than what Storygraph is telling me, so I know I'm probably at least 50% of the way through it, so I'm making progress on that. That having been said, I did finish 4 books in the last 2 weeks, so I want to talk about the books that I finished. First of all, I did finish The Hexologists by Josiah Bancroft. This was a delight. I had a really good time with this. I really like the main protagonists, Iz and Warren Wilby. They are very much a crime fighting type duo in this fun magical world that is clearly pretty heavily based off of like 1920s England, but isn't exactly. It's a secondary world fantasy. Josiah Bancroft is really good with the world building, with the characterization. I just had a good time. This is just one of those books that I flew through it. It's fun, it's adventurous, it's a little bit scary. The 2 main characters just have a super good dynamic. They're a married couple, they love each other, they investigate magical mysteries together and get into all kinds of shenanigans, and it's very nice. I will say, you know, a lot of people are very quick to say that someone has like Pratchett-esque prose or whatever, but I will say Josiah Bancroft comes pretty close to Terry Pratchett at certain points. I did in fact mark a page here because I think this, to me, this passage read a lot like something out of a Discworld novel, and I think it's very fun. So this is just an incidental moment in the book. The proprietor of the Spillway Public House, Mr. Pyle, wore the rattled look of a man who'd been disappointed to discover he'd survived another night's sleep. His teeth, bared by a perpetual grimace to sharpen his dwindling vision, were as brown as the petals of a pine cone and similarly arrayed. Snowy forearms, swollen by years of wrangling taps and kegs, bore the blue and purple badges of recent altercations with patrons who had once again confused his bar room with a boxing ring. The mirror behind him was more crack than glass. All along its great length, the dark backing showed through where projectiles had, over the years, contributed to an increasingly elaborate archipelago of absence. Mr. Pyle had learned long ago that the tidal lunacy of paychecks was stronger than the madness of the full moon. He had also been taught that last call was not an ultimatum, but a bugle call to battle. And he had been ruthlessly schooled that playing the confessor with no power to absolve only left him with a bevy of received but unanswerable sins. So that's kind of how this reads, right? It's very fun. I enjoyed it a lot. It's a good time. So that's The Hexologists by Josiah Bancroft, and I will definitely be picking up the second book in the series, which I think just recently came out. So yeah. And then I did also finish The War of the Ring. This is the next book in the, oh gosh, I always have to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, this is the eighth book in the History of Middle-earth series, 12-volume set, and the third in the History of the Lord of the Rings section of that series. So this is a manuscript history of the Lord of the Rings. It's really hard for me to talk about these books to a general audience because it's one of those things where unless you're just a really hardcore Tolkien nerd who just wants to know all the ins and outs of how characters were developed and how the writing of the Lord of the Rings actually went, this is probably not going to hold much interest for you, and I'm so deep in the weeds on this right now that it's difficult to really talk about it with any kind of coherence. But I mean, it continues to be interesting. I continue to have a good time reading these. Again, it's very much up my alley personally. The bit about how Faramir came into being as a character was really fun, I think. It particularly stand out. There's a lot of interesting things in here. If you are, like me, very hardcore into Tolkien and into the Lord of the Rings and into the saga of Middle-earth and how it came into being, if you're not, you probably won't like this. But yeah, so that's this one. Glad to have another one out. There's one more volume in the History of the Lord of the Rings, which I believe is called Sauron Defeated. And then after that, it's going to be, I think the last 3 volumes are sort of the post Lord of the Rings work on the Silmarillion that he was doing. So that's that. And then I read Calabasas. I really like R.F. Kuang as a writer. I really enjoyed The Poppy War. I really enjoyed Babel. I have them right here on my shelf. I like them enough to purchase them in hardcover. I think Babel might have been a gift, but yeah. R.F. Kuang is a very good writer for me, and I think in a lot of ways Calabasas might be my favorite one of hers so far that I have read. Probably because it is just very much my thing. It's a Calabasas. It's a story of a journey to the underworld, that's exactly the kind of thing that I like. It's also very much about academia. It's very much about relationships. It's about, like any good Calabasas, it's about an examination of the self, which I really appreciate. This is very heavily character-driven. Kuang is, as always, not interested in creating characters that are likable. The characters in this book are, by and large, not very likable, particularly Alice, within whose head we are sitting for most of this book. She is not always a very sympathetic person, but she is very interesting and entirely messed up, right? Like, that's really Kuang's thing, right? Is she really likes writing about characters who are very, very messed up. And Alice is a very messed up person. Peter is also a very messed up person. These are two very messed up people who are on this journey together to find another very messed up person. And yeah, I was really into it. I really liked it. I think in some ways it definitely kind of triggered my old anxieties about grad school. If this book had come out even 5 years ago, I might not have actually been able to read it because it might have triggered me too much. Because especially just the first 20 pages of this book were basically a litany of all the reasons why I'm not in academia anymore. So that's where I'm coming from on this. I'm coming from a place where I've been in academia. I understand what the pressures are. I know how that all works, and it reads very real to me, right? Which I think, that makes sense because Kuang is also an academic, right? So she also is aware of how that all works. So yeah, this is not a fun time, I would say, but I did have a very good time reading it, as in I just really enjoyed it. It's very chewy, it's very meaty kind of book to really sort of get your teeth around, and you know, it's a 3-course meal of a book that's going to leave you very satisfied. At least it did for me. I think, if anything, the ending of this book, I don't want to get into spoilers, but I will say the ending of this book in some ways is maybe a little bit more trite or neat, a little bit neater than Kwong's endings usually tend to be. Though I can't really fault it that much because I did find it very satisfying. So it's one of those things where it's maybe a light criticism, but not a strong one, I would say, because yeah, I enjoyed the ending. And I don't want to get into any spoilery details anyway, but this book worked for me. It's one of those things where if you need your protagonists to be likable people, R.F. Kuang is probably not going to be for you, because that's not the kind of book that she writes. And if you need your hand to be held through everything, like even like the actual time period that this book is set in is never spelled out for you. You're expected to just figure it out through context clues as the book goes on. And so if you're one of those people who needs to have everything sort of explained to you in detail, this is probably not going to be the book for you. On the flip side, she's got a lot of explanations of things that are very, you know, high level kinds of academic, philosophic ideas. I certainly did not understand every reference she was making. I haven't taken a logic class. I maybe took a logic class in undergrad, but I don't think I took a full logic class. I maybe did some logic proofs in the one math class that I took as an undergrad, but I'm not a logician, right? Most people are not logicians or linguists for that matter, but, you know, while I understood most of her literary references and many of her sort of cultural, critical references, the math stuff was less, I was much less, you know, understanding of all of that, but I thoroughly, you know, enjoyed my time with it. Kuang is to me is a very confident writer. She knows exactly what she's doing, and she's going to do it, and you are along for the ride, and it's a very emotional ride. She doesn't shy away. Again, if you've read any of Kuang's books, you know that she doesn't shy away from some pretty dark stuff, some pretty heavy subject matter. She's not afraid of it. She will deal with it, and this is definitely one of those books. But I really liked it. So yeah, that's my Calabasas thing. It was good. I rated it 5 stars. Kuang is one of my favorite authors writing today, and I'm just always looking forward to whatever she comes out with next. So that's that. And then the final book that I read, I blew through in about 48 hours. In fact, I just finished it last night. Wanting just sort of a palate cleanser after Calabasas, I just randomly picked up Sword Heart. Well, not totally randomly, obviously. If you watched my TBR video last week, you'll know that Sword Heart is on my TBR for the 4th quarter. I got a head start on it and picked it up and read it because I read the first sentence when I was choosing my TBR, and I really liked it. And I just was in the mood after reading Calabasas for some T. Kingfisher humor, and I had a really good time with this. So if you're not aware, Sword Heart is a standalone, I think, for the moment, romance fantasy set in Kingfisher's world of the White Rat, in which a number of her books have been set, including the Saint of Steel series. And yeah, it's about a young woman. Well, she would say she's not that young, though I think she's young, because I'm 40 and she's in her 30s. So she's young to me. But her name is Hala. She's in her 30s. She's a widow. She's been caring for her aging great uncle, basically as his housekeeper and nurse. When he dies, he surprisingly leaves all of his money and property to her instead of to his blood family. His relatives, her aunt and cousin by marriage, proceed to lock her up in her room, presumably until she agrees to marry her cousin to keep the inheritance within the family. She decides she's not going to do this. She decides the only way to get out of it is to kill herself. She takes a sword off the wall to kill herself with. When she unsheathes the sword, a man appears in her room. And it kind of goes from there. The man, Sarkis, is bound magically to the sword. He's a warrior. It's a pretty, honestly, in a lot of ways, it's a relatively straightforward bodyguard romance. If you're into that kind of thing, which I am, I very much like a bodyguard romance. I'm really into that kind of thing. This is very much my thing. With full of T. Kingfisher's usual wit and humor and occasional moments of horror, because Kingfisher can't not put in a little bit of horror in her books. And it was a very fun time. So I had a really good time with this. I blew through it, like I said, in about 48 hours, which is not difficult because, of course, Kingfisher's books are not super long and they are also eminently readable. So yeah, I had a really good time with Sword Heart as well. So that's what I finished in the past 2 weeks. Currently, I have started reading another book from my Q4 TBR. On my Kindle, I picked up Old Time Religion by E.H. Lupton from my library, from Hoopla. I'm reading that currently on my Kindle, and I'll probably get through that pretty quickly as well. Again, this is the sequel to Dionysus in Wisconsin, which I read within the last year. And it's queer urban fantasy set in the late 60s, early 70s in Wisconsin, and it's a lot of fun. Our two main characters, Ulysses and Sam, are interesting. This one is more of I wouldn't call it a love triangle. It's one of those, it's like a jealousy plot where one of you, an ex of Ulysses comes back into town, and she is very she's got a case. She's almost a femme fatale kind of character. She brings him a case. She's someone from his past. Sam is a little bit insecure because their relationship is pretty new, and she's a beautiful woman, and she's clearly not telling the whole truth, and she's maybe being a little bit manipulative with Ulysses, and it's, causing some problems, both in terms of the plot, the broader plot of these books, and also, just the relationship between Sam and Ulysses, which is still pretty new. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I'm having a good time. Otherwise, yeah, that's pretty much all I have this time around. Let me know in the comments below what you've been reading, what's on your TBR for the rest of the fall, and if you've read any of the books that I've talked about here, let me know what your thoughts about them were. And otherwise, like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more from me, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.